You just got back from touring a house 40 minutes outside your budget conversation, but somehow inside your pre-approval letter. 5 bedrooms, a bonus room over the garage, a dining room big enough for a table you don't own yet. Your realtor called it growing into the space. You're standing in the primary bedroom picturing furniture that doesn't exist, and something in your chest is already saying yes before your bank account has said anything at all. My name is William, and I need you to put that feeling down for a moment because a bigger house rarely destroys your wealth in one loud signature at closing. It does it slowly, room by room, bill by bill, in a house so quiet you'll forget it's happening. Here's the belief the entire industry is built on, and it's the door every extra square foot walks through. A bigger house feels like the responsible upgrade. You're not buying excess, you're buying room to grow. Room for kids, room for family visits, the smart long-term move a sensible adult makes when they finally can. Capability, not indulgence. And once you've accepted that framing, every cost that follows feels earned instead of examined. So for the next several minutes, let's examine it anyway, one bill at a time, starting with the number on the offer you just signed. The average home price in the U.S. crossed $420,000 in 2026, and in a lot of the country's growing metros, anything with the square footage people call family-sized runs well past that. Compare that to a right-sized starter home in the same market, and the gap between the two is routinely $150,000 to $200,000. You're not just paying more, you're financing more, insuring more, heating more, and taxing more forever on a decision made while standing in an empty room imagining furniture. And nobody walks in with cash. The price lives on a mortgage, and the mortgage is where the quiet draining actually begins, because the payment is engineered to feel survivable long after the total stops being reasonable. Mortgage rates in 2026 are sitting close to 7% for most conventional loans, which means the difference between financing a $280,000 home and a $450,000 one isn't just the sticker gap. It's roughly $1,100 more every single month, before insurance, before taxes, before a single piece of furniture. Stretch that over a 30-year loan, and you've paid more than $200,000 in interest alone on the extra space, money that builds no equity and buys you nothing but the privilege of the loan existing. Then the property tax bill arrives, and it never stops arriving. Bigger homes carry bigger assessed values, and property taxes climb right alongside them, often 1 to 2% of the home's value every single year indefinitely. On a $450,000 house, that's $4,500 to $9,000 a year, compared to $2,800 to $5,600 on the smaller one. That gap doesn't get paid off like a loan. It renews every year for as long as you own the place, quietly outpacing your raises most years. Insurance follows the same shape. A larger home costs more to rebuild, which means more to insure, and premiums have been climbing hard the last few years as rebuilding costs and severe weather claims both rise. The average homeowner's policy on a larger property now runs well over $2,000 a year in many states, and in areas facing wildfire or flood risk, that number climbs fast and shows no sign of slowing down. Now stack the utilities, because square footage doesn't heat or cool itself for free. More rooms means more surface area losing warmth in winter and gaining heat in summer, more square footage of lighting, more water heating for bathrooms that see use twice a month. Households in larger homes routinely spend 30 to 50% more on utilities than households in modest ones, even accounting for family size, because the extra rooms cost money whether anyone's standing in them or not. Here's where the costs stop being separate and start compounding into each other, because a bigger house doesn't just cost more to own, it costs more to fill. Real estate agents and interior designers both know this pattern by heart. The empty bonus room doesn't stay empty. The formal dining room needs a table. The extra bedroom needs a bed, a dresser, curtains, someone to clean it. One survey of recent homebuyers found the average household spends over $15,000 furnishing a new home in the first year alone, and that number scales directly with square footage. You didn't just buy a bigger house, you bought a bigger shopping list that arrives disguised as decorating. And this is the exact moment where a bigger house defender raises a hand and says, "Sure, but real estate always appreciates. You're not spending that money, you're investing it." That's the trump card, and I need to gently take that away from you because the math underneath it tells a very different story than the headline does. Home appreciation nationally has averaged somewhere around 4 to 5% a year over long stretches, which sounds solid until you subtract everything we just walked through. Once you factor in the extra interest, the extra taxes, the extra insurance, and the extra maintenance that a bigger home demands every single year, a meaningful share of that appreciation gets eaten alive before it ever becomes real liquid wealth. You're not banking the 4%, you're banking 4% minus a stack of carrying costs that never take a year off. Which brings us to maintenance, and this is the one that ambushes people years in, right when they've stopped expecting it. The standard rule of thumb puts annual upkeep at roughly 1 to 2% of a home's value every year for as long as you own it. On a $450,000 house, that's $4,500 to $9,000 annually in roofing, HVAC, plumbing, and the dozens of small repairs a larger structure simply generates more of because there's more roof, more ductwork, more pipe, more surface for something to eventually go wrong. Now, let's actually total it. Between the extra interest, the extra taxes, the extra insurance, the extra utilities, and the extra maintenance on that bigger house compared to the modest one, you're looking at somewhere between $1,800 and $2,400 in additional carrying cost every month. Not the mortgage difference alone, the whole picture. Over 10 years, that's well over $200,000 spent on square footage that, if we're honest, doesn't get used the way the sales pitch promised it would.
Because here's the part nobody runs the numbers on. How often does that extra space actually get used? Survey data on homeowners with guest rooms finds the average guest room gets used fewer than 20 nights a year. Formal dining rooms, the ones every bigger house seems to demand, sit empty outside of 2 or 3 holidays annually for most families. Bonus rooms over the garage frequently become storage for boxes nobody's opened since the move. You are paying full carrying cost every month on rooms that function as expensive closets for 340-some days a year. Let me introduce you to 2 families to make this concrete, because the gap between them is where the real story lives. Same town, same combined income, same year they started house hunting. We'll call them the Hendersons and the Boyds. The Hendersons stretched for the 5-bedroom, the bonus room, the dining room built for gatherings that happen 3 times a year. Their all-in monthly housing cost, mortgage, taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance, runs about $4,100. The Boyds toured the same market and bought a comfortable, right-sized 3-bedroom instead. Their all-in monthly cost sits around $2,300. Same income, same year, same market. The only real difference between these 2 households is what's sitting on their street. That $1,800 monthly gap is where the story stops being about houses and starts being about everything else. The Boyds take that difference and put it into a simple index fund every single month, then do the hardest thing in personal finance. They leave it alone. At a historical average return of 7%, that $1,800 a month becomes something extraordinary. Over 15 years, it's not just the roughly $324,000 they contributed. With growth compounding on top, it's well over $550,000. Over a full 30-year stretch, that same gap becomes more than $2.1 million. The Hendersons don't feel that loss happen. There's no bill for it, no line item on any statement they'll ever open. They just quietly never build it while making payments on a dining room they use at Thanksgiving. This decision seemed small at the time. It was the opposite of small. It was a room-by-room decision to trade a retirement made while standing in a space that was, at the time, completely empty. Now, I want to be genuinely fair here, because this isn't an argument against bigger homes across the board. If you're raising 4 kids and you're already out of bedrooms, if you run a business out of your home and need the office space to actually operate, if multiple generations are living under one roof and the square footage is solving a real, present problem rather than a hypothetical future one, then the bigger house isn't a trap. It's a tool, and a genuinely necessary one is worth paying for. The problem was never square footage itself. The problem is buying capacity you're financing today for a life you might grow into someday, while the carrying costs run every single month whether that day arrives or not. So if you're standing where you were at the start of this video, in that empty primary bedroom picturing furniture that doesn't exist yet, here's the honest way through it. First, buy for the life you're actually living right now, not the one you're picturing on your best, most aspirational day. Second, if you do need room to grow, run the real math on the extra carrying cost before you fall for the appreciation story, because the 4 or 5% isn't the number that lands in your pocket. Third, keep your total housing cost, all of it, under a number your income can absorb without swallowing the money that should be quietly compounding somewhere else. And if the honest math says you can't fit the bigger house inside that number yet, the unglamorous truth is that you can't actually afford it yet, no matter how good it looked with that furniture you haven't bought. Go stand back in that bedroom one more time, at least in your mind. Picture the same room, but this time picture the number attached to it. Not the mortgage payment you've made peace with, all of it. The tax bill that renews every year, the insurance that keeps climbing, the maintenance that ambushes you in year 7, the furniture you'll buy to fill a room you'll use 20 nights a year. Then ask yourself honestly whether that's the trade you actually want to make. For some of you, the answer is a clear and genuine yes, and now you know exactly what you're paying for. For a lot of you, the answer is going to sting a little, and I want you to know that the sting is the most useful thing you'll take from this video, because it's the moment the quiet cost finally gets loud enough to hear. And none of this, the mortgage math, the opportunity cost, the compounding gap between two families on the same street, means anything without understanding the foundation underneath it. How interest actually compounds against you and for you, how to run the real numbers on a decision before you're standing in the room making it emotionally instead. That's the groundwork everything else gets built on, and I put together a full breakdown of exactly that on this channel, waiting whenever you're ready to stop deciding with your feet still standing in the empty room and start deciding with the calculator in your hand.